Yeah, hi everyone, Jason here, Robot Lawnmowers Australia. Today's video is going to be just a bit of an introduction to the wireless technology that's coming forward now in the market of robotic lawnmowers. Just basically going to try and give you a bit of an understanding of what the technology is all about, how the new technology works and what the different technologies are in the different models that are coming forward. With what models we're going to see in Australia, hopefully in the near to distant future, and the pros and cons of the technology, how it works, what we've found so far. Basically trying to answer the question whether this technology is actually going to be right for you in your yard. And then, really, most importantly, we're trying to answer the question of whether you should wait for a wireless technology to evolve and come about and be released in Australia, or whether you should just install a wired traditional robot mower like the ones behind me here in your yard, because possibly the technology is going to take a long time to actually develop to the point where it might actually be able to mow the yard in your circumstances. Okay, so look, a basic introduction to these guys and what they're all about is that wireless robot lawnmowers are exactly what they say. They don't require any wires to be installed around the perimeter of the lawn. Traditionally, all the robot mowers like behind me here, they all require a boundary wire to be installed all the way around the boundary, around obstacles and trees and pools and driveways and whatever else you've got where you don't want the robot to actually go. They require a boundary wire to be installed to delineate where the robot can mow and where it can't. So the wireless technology pretty much just gets rid of all that requirement to install a boundary wire around the outside. And typically the way the robots do it, and most of them are going to do it this way, is that you'll have an app on your phone and you'll use that app to remote control the robot all the way around the boundary. And it will record its position as you're remote controlling around the boundary, and that will set the map inside the robot on where it can and can't mow. Then you'll do the same thing for obstacles, trees, again, driveways, pools, gardens, whatever it might be. You can do off-limits areas within, or no-go zones within the outer boundary where you don't want the robot to go. And then mostly in 90% of cases with the robot mowers at the moment is that they're also going to mow up and down in lines. So they will mow like a traditional push mower, and you'll mow up and down in lines. So it will mow the lawn far more efficiently than what the wired models will do, where they operate in a random pattern where they just bounce all over the place basically. So hopefully they should be far more efficient in how they mow, which means they can mow for less hours per week, and hopefully only mow 2 or 3 times a week, maybe 3 or 4 times a week on your property to give almost the same results as a traditional wired mower will do when it's operating on every day on your property. Okay. So what is the new technology coming out, and sort of how does it work roughly? I'll keep it very, very simple, obviously. Look, most of the robot mowers are going to use essentially an RTK-based system, which is basically it's a GPS correction system. So it's using the GPS signal that we traditionally use in our phones and our cars and everything else, but it's using an antenna or a reference station, much like this one here for the Segway. And it uses those antennas to actually correct the GPS signal to make it more accurate for the robot. Traditionally, GPS signals are really, really inaccurate. At best, they're 1 or 2 meters at best, but traditionally, really in the robot mowers with the ones that have got GPS in them, 10 to 20 meters is probably fairly accurate for most cases. As soon as the robots get near walls or trees or anything like that, well, then that GPS signal can quite easily be 50 meters out, sort of thing. So we quite regularly have our robots operating outside the store here, which has got a big wall and some trees out there, and the GPS position on them is actually showing the robot on the other side of the road, which is a good 50 meters away. So so traditional GPS is really, really inaccurate, and this RTK, which stands for real-time kinematic, which just corrects the GPS signal so the robot can actually be accurate. Can actually be accurate down to about 1 to 2 centimeters in most cases, and that's when it's got a good line of sight with the sky and connected to many satellites. So The reference station, so much like this one here, the key to it all really is that this reference station really needs to be in a really good open location, and it needs at least 120, so it needs at least a 120 degree to 160 degree view of the sky in all directions and a direct line of sight with the sky. So no trees, no houses, no fences, nothing in its line of sight to the sky really is the key to making these things work as best as possible. They can operate without having that complete line of sight with the sky. It just makes them far more inaccurate, and when the robot gets itself in a position where it might be under trees or near a fence, it'll lose its positioning and it will fail and just won't be very reliable for you. So also within most of these robot lawnmowers that are using the RTK GPS systems, is they have what's called an IMU, which is a inertial measurement unit. So it actually measures every single movement the robot makes, whether it turns left, right. It's got a compass inside it as well, and basically just measures everything from acceleration to angles. Just everything. Every time that robot moves, it actually measures how it moves. And then that also combines with encoders on the drive motors of the robots, which also measures the distance or the amount the actual wheels turn on the robot. So with those two sensors combined with the RTK, they try and calculate exactly where the robot is. Even when it doesn't have a really great RTK signal to the robot, it tries to measure and actually calculate where it is within the boundary. And until such time as it either can't calculate or it thinks that it could be outside the boundary, even though it doesn't have an RTK positioning signal at the time, then the robot will stop if it gets to that point. There's also a lot of other sensors that the robots are using, and so typically it's vision is going to be one of the big ones that most of the robots will get to eventually. Some work on it primarily on vision at the moment, and others will just have a vision as a secondary sensor from the RTK. You've also got LiDAR and radar and ultrasonic sensors that will actually help the robot know what's in front of it and what's around it and what its surroundings are like. But none of those sensors particularly work perfectly well outside unless they're combined with others. So you really need 2, 3 or even 4 of these types of sensors all combined together for the robot to really be able to position and know where it is, and then to be able to identify obstacles and go around them. So the robots that we're very likely to see, I know some of the ones that absolutely are coming to Australia, but I can tell you the ones that are most likely to be here, and I'll give you a bit of an idea of what each of those robots use. But firstly, it's going to be the Segway Navimo, which is right in front of me here at the moment. So the Segway Navimo operates on the RTK system. It also has a secondary sensor that I don't have yet, but there's a secondary sensor that will actually be a vision sensor that go on the front of the robot as well. So it'll actually use RTK, the IMU, the encoders, as well as a vision sensor as well. So that's covering quite a few bases. But then we have the Luba that will be coming from Emotion. So that'll come to Australia. It primarily only uses the RTK and the IMU system. It does have ultrasonic sensors on the front of it, so it can actually see just in front of it to be able to just do basic maneuvers around obstacles that will be in front of it. Then there's probably the Landroid Vision will also come to Australia. I'm not entirely sure of when for the Landroid, but it's primarily only using a vision sensor. So it's got a light on the front and a vision sensor, so that it can actually see where it's going even when it's at night time. And it's obviously it'll have IMU and that sort of stuff as well inside there, obviously. But it's going to use the vision sensor as its primary sensor. After that, we go to Cress. So Cress, which is actually made by the same company that does make the Works Landroid, but Cress will be using a pure RTK system with IMU again and encoders. The difference with the Cress system is that these reference stations here won't be local on your property. They'll actually be positioned at the dealer networks around the country, and that you'll only buy the robot and put the robot on your property and actually install it and run it. You won't have the antenna won't be on your property at all. It'll be serviced by Cress nationally. So that'll be an interesting one to see when we get hold of it. Ambrogio, almost the same sort of scenario. Ambrogio will be an RTK based system again. We're expecting big things of Ambrogio when they do get here. but we're not entirely sure exactly when they'll get there. Husqvarna will be releasing their system. We won't sell that here, not at the moment, we certainly don't, but Husqvarna will release their Nero system as well in Australia. I don't know when again. I suspect it'll be a fair way away actually for the Husqvarna side of things. They're usually pretty cautious on where and when they release their products. And the EcoVac G1, which is its nickname EcoVac Goat, that's actually the technology that was produced by Roomba many years ago, which was the Roomba Terra, or the iRobot Terra. It was called, and it was taken away from the market a few years ago. It's actually using a vision-based system, and it's also using individual sensors that you actually place around the yard. You sort of put 3, 4, 5, 6 of these sensors that get located around the garden, and it bounces its signal off those sensors as well and positions itself from that. So again, expecting big things of EcoVac when it comes out, but it looks like they're just releasing now in Europe as a trial run. So we'll see what comes back from that trial, and hopefully we'll see the EcoVac here in Australia in the future. It'll certainly be in 2024. There's no doubt about that for that one. Novabot, no real understanding of exactly whether we will or won't get the Novabot. I know they're planning to release it in Australia, so hopefully we'll see that hopefully next year as well. It's again a vision-based sensor, and then they've actually gone to an RTK in that as well. Afterwards, originally it was just primarily vision, and now they've actually gone and installed RTK in it as well. So again, expecting big things of those if they do make it here. And then there's the Conga. I really don't know if the Conga. I assume the Conga will make it here. I don't know. I'm not. It's probably one of the companies I'm not in contact with, but it's primarily a vision-based sensor. The bigger difference between the Conga and all the others is that it's supposed to map itself. So you put it down, and it actually goes out and maps itself without having to remote control it around the borders. So we'll see if that one ever gets here. So that's the other units that are actually coming to Australia. So currently, just to let you know, so we're obviously testing the Navimo here. We've been testing that for almost 2 years now. And we're also testing the Luba here that we physically have. I was hoping to have one here for this video, but the one we have is actually out mowing grass at the moment. So we are testing both of those. They're both giving us very positive results. We're doing, the testing we're doing is quite comprehensive on them, and they're doing very, very well. They've both got their pros and cons from each other. So they're both very similar systems. Obviously, the Luba is a 4-wheel drive machine versus a 2-wheel drive with the Segway. But it's sort of quite similar in the way they work and how they operate. But they definitely do each have pros and cons from each other, and we'll release some review videos of each of the models as we get closer to actually releasing in Australia. We want to make sure that we're trying to use the actual production models for the country when we're doing the testing, whereas currently the models we have are not the models that will actually be released here in Australia. So each of the models and the manufacturers that I've just mentioned, they're all in very different stages of their of their final design and then moving into mass production. So some are a bit further behind than others. Some are a bit more progressed. It really comes down to they're all in a bit of a race to try and release before each other. So hopefully they get their design finalised and refined before they actually release. Segway has already been released in Europe, and it's been going for almost a year now. Their first revision out there was not that great. It had many flaws in it. We tested that model here as well, and we also had the same scenario where it had many flaws. The model now, which is this one here, is one of the new ones now. It's working much better, and honestly, it's 100 times better than the first model. So it's doing really, really well, and they're now releasing that model over in Europe. So we'll see how that goes. So they're the two that we're actually testing here, and hopefully in the near future we'll sort of start testing the Works Vision, the Crest are probably the next two that we'll probably see. And other than that, we're really not quite sure what models we're going to see first here in Australia. Okay. So on to the pros and cons of this technology coming forward, and obviously there's a lot of pros, but there are also some cons, and some of those cons are basically showstoppers for some people, depending on what your lawn's really like. So obviously the very first pro is there's no boundary wire. So there's no boundary wire to install in the first place. There's no boundary wire to get damaged or cut or anything along the way. It also means that if you want to make changes to your lawn, you want to install a garden or whatever it might be, it's very, very easy to include an extra no-go zone or something and then take it away afterwards. So even if you want set up a tent in your backyard, you can do so. You can remote control the robot around the tent and tell it not to go there for the next 5 days or whatever it might be. And then when you're finished and you've packed everything up, you can just delete that little no-go zone out of the map. So it's very, very flexible in how it actually operates and how you map the yard. It also has obviously the ability to travel from one area to another without having to install the boundary wires, which is a really big one. So it can travel obviously from one side of your driveway to the other side of the driveway without any need to cut through your driveway with boundary wires and things like that. So it's very, very easy to put paths between the areas. And multiple paths, even multiple paths back to the base stations can actually be quite good. The Segway doesn't do that right now, but the Luba does, where you can have multiple pathways back to the base station. So it can go out to zone 1, it can have its own pathway back to the base station, out to zone 2, have its own pathway back to the base station. It really is very flexible in how it actually operates. So it sort of means that the base station doesn't necessarily need to be on the lawn or even near the lawn, as opposed to previously where the base station really does need to be either on or very close to the lawn. Flexibility in scheduling. They've got, most of these models are going to be able to go out to individual zones at certain times times of the days, times of the week. So again, if you've got an area where it has to pass through a gate, you'll be able to actually set it up so it only mows that area on Tuesday at 2 o'clock. So that you can make sure that you open the gate before it has to go out on that particular day, so the robot can get out and get back by itself. So very flexible on that front, and mostly at the moment we can see that a lot of them are going to also allow different heights to be cut, or different cutting heights per lawn area, so you can actually have it go out and cut zone 1 at 35 millimeters, zone 2 at 45 millimeters, which in some cases that's going to be a really good thing for some customers that have got multiple lawn types on their property. The cons. So look, the cons of the product really is whether it actually can and can't work on your property. The first con is that most of them are going to have an RTK reference station like this, and that reference station needs to have, again, that 120 to 160 degree view of the sky, which means it really needs to be usually quite high up on your property. So you'll probably have to install this antenna on the roof of your house, on the side of the roof somewhere, something like that, possibly a standalone antenna pole. If you've got a really open property, it won't be a problem. You'll be able to install this antenna, this RTK reference station, on the pole that comes with them, which is just beside the base station, and it should be perfectly fine. But in a lot of cases, we're going to find that this reference station is going to need to be mounted, quite high up, and it's going to have that 120 degree clear view of the sky wherever it goes. GPS shadowing is the key flaw to this technology of RTK. So, like I said, the antenna will be put in a position where it's got a clear view of the sky, but the robot still has to go over your entire yard, which means it's most likely going to try and go reasonably close to a fence or a house or under a tree, wherever it might be, and that's going to cause the robot to have shadowing of the satellite coverage, and it won't have enough satellites to actually to position the robot properly. So, generally speaking, the flaw really is that the robots themselves shouldn't really travel within about 1 to 1.5 meters of a wall that's taller than 2.4 meters, and they shouldn't travel underneath tree canopies. Any great tree canopies basically not too far under, and they can't be under the tree canopy for a long period of time. So, with our testing, we have found that they absolutely will mow underneath tree canopies, but it really comes down to exactly how that tree canopy is positioned, how thick the canopy is, how deep it is, how far under the canopy it goes, and how long the robot spends under the canopy when it's going under there. If it's an optical system, well then the con is obviously the lens. The lens obviously needs to be cleaned at all times. I did notice that the EcoVac Goat actually has a base station where it docks into the base station. There's a little brush that comes out and actually cleans the lens every time it comes back to the base station. I'm not quite sure how effective that's really going to be long term, but yeah, so lenses on cameras are definitely going to be something to overcome when it comes to the lenses getting dirty. Obstacle identification for these guys with that GPS signal again, or probably even more so with the vision, is that if it can't identify what the obstacle is in front of it, it may just decide to either stop and go into error, or it might just avoid it, which is what you sort of want it to do. Things like small things that are on the lawn, Obviously, you've got the dog poo scenario, where in most cases you don't want the robot to go over that, but then that's a rather small object in most cases, and other small objects like a gum leaf or a leaf that's going to be on the lawn, you want the robot to mow over. So vision-based systems have really got that sort of thing to overcome. We haven't had one in our hands to test yet, so we can't really tell you exactly how well they work or don't work. But as we get them, we'll completely fully update you with how they operate. Exclusions of areas, again, with that whole scenario of the RTK and the GPS shadowing, the vision-based and cannot identify the borders and things like that. There may be scenarios where you're going to have to exclude areas of your yard. So that's definitely a big con when it comes to this technology. For instance, again, if you've got your grass hard up against the side of your house, well, then there might be a 1 metre exclusion zone on the side of the house that it won't be able to mow. So you'll either have to convert that to path or garden, or just exclude it and mow it in a more traditional manner. So that's probably one of the biggest cons that comes to this technology. So to answer the question, will this technology work in your yard? It really comes down to there's three basic questions that if you can answer yes to all three, well, then there's a good chance that you should be able to use this technology in your yard. The first one is, do you have a location that this reference station can be mounted where it can have a full 120 to 160 degree view of the sky? Do you have tall walls that the yard's right up against? Anything more than 1.8 metres is where you start questioning whether the robot will be able to actually mow up close to it or not. And do you have trees that canopy over the yard? That really, if you can answer yes to the fact that you don't have trees that canopy the yard, you don't have walls up against the lawn, and you can install this base station in a location where you can get 120 degrees, all the way around the RTK station, then there's a good chance that this technology will work quite well for you. It really comes down to exactly how intricate your yard is at that point, because also narrow pathways are a particular issue. So if you've got narrow pathways for the robot to go down, again, as long as it's got a really clear, where the robot in that narrow pathway has a clear view of the sky, and again the robot then has about 120 degree view of the sky, then chances are it'll work really quite well for you. What you can do also is that for answer a bit more technical questions about your yard, but if you jump onto the Segway Navimo website, they've actually got a checklist on the website that you can actually go through and answer a whole bunch of questions on how your yard's formatted, what shape it is, and trees and yards and narrow spaces, and it will give you an idea of whether it'll either come up with a no, it's not suitable for you, or it'll come up with an answer saying it might be suitable, but you need to talk to a dealer to establish exactly whether it will or won't work for you, or it'll tell you that it will work for you. It's pretty quick in telling you that it won't work for you, because obviously they're very conscious of the fact that they don't want to sell the product to people and then find out that it doesn't work for them. So honestly, the best idea really is to get in contact with us, send us photos, videos of your yard, showing the trees, the house, the roof line, the sky view basically, and all the lawn areas, and then we can sort of give you a good idea of whether the technology that's coming out this year will work for you, or whether you really need to wait for the more complicated systems like the EcoVac Go to come out before you get something that will actually work in your yard. So then the final question is, should you wait for this technology to actually reach the Australian market, or should you just install any of the wired robot lawnmowers behind me now? And look, it honestly just comes down to two things: is obviously your yard and whether this technology is going to actually work, and whether you actually want to wait. And the wait, obviously it's very undetermined, the wait, I suppose. We're likely to see a couple of models arrive in Australia, around about sort of September, October, maybe November. But honestly, there's no real fixed timeline, so that really could drag on and on and on. Most of the models won't be received here in Australia until 2024, and whether that's early, mid, or late is really a big question mark. We honestly don't know. They all really need to be released in Europe and tested for a period of time before the manufacturers will even consider bringing them back into Australia. And even then, the Australian companies will want to test them for a period of time before they release them to the Australian market. So yeah, look, the likelihood of seeing more than one or two or three of these models before 2024 is only just. I think they will be released in 2023, but only just. And then the likelihood of others dragging out until mid to late 2024 is probably quite likely. The ones we will see here will be the Luba, the Segway. They'll be the first two most likely, and they're the ones I am expecting to see in 2023. But honestly, there's no fixed date on that, so I can't guarantee there will be. Then there's the Works Vision, which again is scheduled to be released in 2023. Will it be released? It's a big question mark on that one. And then all the others I know are not coming until 2024. And again, whether it's early, mid or late, it really is an undetermined amount of time. So that's as far as the timing goes. Again, to answer the question whether you should or shouldn't wait, it comes down to your yard. If you've got a small yard that's got narrow pathways, fences, gates, trees, house, all the sort of normal things that just about every domestic yard's got, then there's a very strong possibility that this technology is not going to work, at least for the next couple of years until they refine it. So trialing these things out is possibly worth it, but there's a very good chance that you're going to have significant excluded areas in your yard if it's just a standard yard that's got narrow pathways. And by narrow pathways, I really am talking less than 3 meters wide. Anything more than 3 meters wide is perfectly okay. Less than 3 meters wide is where some of this technology starts questioning whether it can work or not. If your yard is large, open, you have few obstacles, you can definitely put this unit in a clear spot, and the robot in 90% of cases, 95% of cases is going to be in a fairly open area with no fences and trees, everything else. But then I'd say absolutely wait, because things like the Navi-mow and the Segway, Navi-mow and the Luba might actually be perfectly fine for you. The one thing I haven't mentioned through this whole video is this little green guy sitting right beside me here, which is the Ambrogio L60. It's available now. It has been available for the last decade just about. It doesn't use any fancy technology, but it mows the lawn without any perimeter wires. So we've got some review videos and things on our website that actually show you exactly how that works and how the sensors work. But that is a product that you can actually buy right now, and that works typically in smaller areas, small courtyardy type areas is what that's really best for. So look, I hope that sort of answers the question for you, or at least gives you some indication of whether gives you some information so you can make a decision on whether you do wait for this technology to arrive or whether you just bite the bullet now and just get something installed that's got a perimeter wire. I do feel that perimeter wide mowers are going to be around for a long time to come. I don't think they're going to disappear anytime soon, because I just don't think any of this new technology is going to just instantly take over. It's all got a lot of refinement to go. So there's certainly no silver bullet when it comes to a wireless mower at the moment. Like I said, unless you've got one big open area, well then some of these wireless mowers will do a fantastic job. But as soon as you've got any practical property that's got houses and trees and gardens and carports and driveways and things like that, then it's very likely that the wireless mower is going to be the only machines that will work for you for some time to come. Okay, so I really hope that helps. If you have any questions at all, please, as always, just jump on our website www.robotlawnmowers.com.au. You can email us at sales@robotlawnmowers.com.au. And you can find us on Facebook. Just search for Robot Lawnmowers Australia on Facebook and we'll pop up. Thanks for watching.